I don't think BTS refusing to submit to the Grammys this year is shocking. I think what would have been shocking is if they still care. Because after everything BTS has done over the past few years, after breaking records, dominating charts, selling out stadiums, and becoming one of the biggest music acts on the planet, we are somehow still having the same conversation. And honestly, that's exactly the problem. When BTS came back this year, expectations were huge. Not because fans wanted another chart record or wanted another number one, but because this finally felt like the year BTS would be recognized in the major Grammy categories: Album of the Year, Record of the Year, Song of the Year, or Artist of the Year. The categories that define an artist's legacy. And let's be real, this wasn't wishful thinking from fans. BTS came back and immediately dominated charts across multiple platforms. Months later, songs from the albums are still charting. Not because of a release week boost, not because of a trend, but because people are still listening. 5 months later. That doesn't happen by accident. Then came the announcement. The Grammy introduced several new categories. One of them was Best Asian Performance. And that's where a lot of fans stopped and said, wait a second. Because Asia is not one music industry. Asia isn't one language. Asia isn't one culture. You're talking about Korean artists, Japanese artists, Chinese artists, Indian artists, artists from dozens of countries, artists creating completely different style of music. So instead of asking whether those artists belong in the biggest category, the conversation suddenly became, here's your own category. And to many fans, that felt less like inclusion and more like separation. This frustration didn't appear overnight. BTS has been nominated before. They have performed at the Grammy, they have presented awards, they have generated attention, they have generated engagement, they have generated viewers, but they never won. And after a while, people started asking a very uncomfortable question. If BTS is one of the biggest group in the world, why does recognition always seems to stop at the same point? There was a Forbes article years ago that raised a similar question. Not whether BTS needed the Grammys, but whether Grammys needed BTS. And honestly, the longer this situation continued, the harder that question became to ignore. And here's where I think people misunderstand the conversation. This isn't just about BTS, this isn't even just about Asian artists. Tyler, the creator, once spoke about how artists who look like him are often pushed into genre specific categories rather than being recognized in broader categories like pop. His point wasn't that those categories shouldn't exist. His point was that artists shouldn't be limited by assumption about where they come from or what they look like. And that's why this discussion feels familiar. Because whenever music gets sorted by language, region, race, or background before it gets evaluated as music, people are going to question it. They announced that they would not be submitting to the Grammy this year. And the most powerful part wasn't the decision itself, it was the message. We hope music can be heard and loved for the music itself rather than being divided by region or language. The sentence says more than any fan argument ever could. Because at its core, that's what this has always been about. Not Korean music, not Asian music, just music. So when BTS decided not to submit this year, I didn't see it as them giving up. I saw it as them knowing their worth and them standing on business. At some point when you have broken every record people said you couldn't broke, when you have built one of the biggest fan bases in the music history, and when your music continues to dominate month after release, validation becomes less important. The Grammys are supposed to recognize greatness. Greatness doesn't stop existing because it wasn't recognized. And maybe that's why so many fans are celebrating this decision. Not because BTS walked away from the Grammys, but because they no longer need them. So, this was my opinion on BTS not submitting for the Grammy this year. Let me know about your views in the comments. I'll see you there till then. Bye bye.